I'm gonna start. I'll go. Gonna first go through a simple description of what a Warlock is. Okay, a Warlock is pretty much a ranged class. Has a repeatable 1, 2, 3 left click. Okay, and the RB, it depends on what spec you put into RB. It could be either a spammed or a delayed blast version that actually requires the player to have paying attention to it. Okay. This range class is kind of different from every other class for ranged. In that this range class actually has a block, an on-demand block, pretty much like a BM's or a KFM's, and it holds for 1.5 seconds to 2 seconds depending on what spec you put it in. You literally can block anything that is actually blockable. So that's the major difference between every other range class: an FM, Summoner, and Warlock. Warlock is the only one that has an on-demand block. Now the other thing that sets a Warlock apart is a pet, a summon pet, a time-limited summon pet. Once you summon it, it takes 28 seconds to summon, and it only stands there. It's not like a summoner's cat. You see, it doesn't follow me. It doesn't follow, and it has a time limit, 32 seconds. And you can spec the pet for either defensive, where it has a lot more HP and defense, or offensive, where it has a lot more attack, but the defense is quite low. It can get pretty much 3-shot because it has no defenses. And the pet also takes after summoners, where if you spec into it one talent, one skill point, okay, any one skill point, it will taunt as long as you Q onto it with that skill. Q. If you Q onto target, it will taunt the target for 3 seconds. There's no indicator of that, how long it is, how it's forcing the target to taunt. There is no circle. There is no circle like a cat's taunt aura or anything. As long as it Qs onto the target, instantly it will taunt. It will force the target to hit the summon. Those are the two major differences between one, a Warlock between all range classes, which is an on-demand block, and a Warlock and a Summoner, which is the pet is time limited and it's not there all the time. So the Warlock must know when and if a summon is needed. You don't see Warlocks just constantly summon their pets just to have an aura or something, because there's a lot of mechanics that actually require the Warlock to summon their demon at very specific times. Very, very specific times. Because there are some mechanics, just like the current endgame dungeon, where if you don't have a summoner to taunt after a certain mechanic, you need this Warlock to summon the demon and Q into to summon onto the target to taunt. Pretty much a Warlock can be a mini summoner in the sense that they can use that pet in the same way that they use a cat, that summoners can use cats. Now for Willux, there are 2 buffs that are majorly important that people must watch for. First one is this blue arrowed icon. Now blue arrowed icon, you need to wait or use this too. That's actually different. There. The blue arrowed icon is very important for releasing Soul Steal, which is F. Now F allows an instant cast for 4 MV regardless of what spec you are in. Stealing it gives you 12 seconds of Soul Stolen, which grants you instant cast of the whichever spec it is, and the ability to use your fort whenever you steal the soul. That's the first important icon that players will have to watch out for. The second important icon, depending on what spec you go, a lot of people are really looking forward to using this spec, this Dimension Bullet spec. That targeting, that bullseye icon, is needed for your Dimension Bullet to be instant. Now see, I don't have the icon on. It's a 0.7 second cast. If I don't have it, it will always be a cast. Now if I have an icon on, it casts instantly. And it literally is spammable because this has a 0.5 second global cooldown. If you see the time dial on it, it's 0.5 second cooldown. So those two are the most important icons that a player has to watch out for if they're going to play a Warlock. This blue triangle icon, which means a soul is vulnerable. You can steal a soul with your F. And the blue target, the bullseye, that allows instant cast of Dimension Bullet. Now if you're not going the ice spec Dimension Bullet, and if you're going shadow, then you can literally disregard the blue bullseye icon. You can disregard the blue bullseye icon, but now you need to pay attention to your own buff list. And if you see, it turns blue and it has 3 seconds after you use it. It's a delayed blast. You fire the first one, and then the icon turns blue. You have 3 seconds to use that. If you see, it does more damage. And it also gives you 2 shadow orbs. Now if you continuously fire it, it doesn't really do much more damage. The delayed blast is what makes you do actually more damage. And it is also free of chi, the second one, regardless of which one it is. If it's quick cast or if it's a delayed, they're both free of chi use. It's only the initial hit that takes 3 chi. Now, once you're in shadow, if you're in shadow RB spec, you want to slowly build those delay blasts in order to build up shadow orbs. Now if you have 3 shadow orbs, you have the ability to call the shadow dragons, the half dragons, and it's an instant cast. And you see, you have no ability to use fort. You cannot use it if you do not have shadow orbs. Once I use up shadow orbs, the Warlock has to build up the shadow orbs again and again. So those are the 3 important icons. 2 of them are a debuff. Depending on what spec you are, you might have a 3rd that you need to look out for. And the Warlock's main spec really alternates between using both shadow 4 and Shadow RB, and Ice 4 and Ice RB. Now, this one is the PvE version of it. This V is usually the one used, regardless of what spec you are. Just because of the method that you can reset the time on this and get a second set in. I'll explain that later. And you should be using this version because it reduces your threat, and along that it does more damage. It's a 300 more base damage ratio. Now the first spec I'll just show is Ice. A lot of people see the classic double dragon and they'll know that, oh, it's a Warlock. Except the double dragons actually has a long cooldown if you do not do any others, if you don't fully utilize any other skills in order to minimize the cooldown of it. And it's a long cast, 2.5 second cast. Very, very long cast. So you're standing there just trying to get dragons out, using all your skills to get dragons out. And the rest of the time, as an ice spec, you're watching for the blue bullseye and trying to spam as many bullets as you can while keeping up your chi. Rikumo, this only decreases your RB damage, but as you can see, the RB actually does quite a lot of damage. It does 5k with not really good gear. My Warlock's gear is not that great. This is really the lowest standard of any gear on KR. 600 something is a very low standard. It's a very average character. And I can still do 5 to 6k crits and 8k crits. That's a lot of damage still for a very low end geared character. $626 is nothing compared to my Destroyer. My Destroyer has 800, like say 870 plus, 880 plus. So 600 is very, very low, along with the very low crit damage, 238. It's not a lot of crit damage. I have 280 something on my Destroyer, 270 something. It's a difference of 40%. If I had a difference of 40% on my Warlock, you would be seeing 10 to 12k crits on just fast cast RBs. Yeah, my Destroyer is also more played. That was just a light demonstration of Ice Warlock. Okay, I'm going step by step. I'll show you the basic, just using fours and RBs, how they work in conjunction. And now we'll show the shadow version of it. And like I said, this V is usually the same one for both specs because of the 18-second cooldown. Warlocks really need this. You see how I'm always using a delayed RB. Okay. The V serves a double purpose for Shadow spec. The V will instantly give the Warlock 3 Shadow Orbs for the Shadow spec. As soon as the V hits, you are able to use the Shadow Dragons because you have 3 orbs. And the orbs constantly refresh. So if you don't want to cast a 4, if you don't feel like casting a 4, you can keep refreshing it. Like this. 3 stacks. And it refreshes to 10 seconds. It refreshes. Constantly refreshes. There's no need to use it before it ends up to 10 because you can always refresh it. There's no significant damage difference. It's a preference, Yulan. It's a preference. It is a preference between the 2 specs. It is also gear dependent. On KR it is gear dependent because if I don't have a piece of this certain bopay, it is very hard for me to use Ice spec as efficient compared to other Warlocks. That is why you'll see that I am more of a Shadow Warlock because I don't have that cooldown reduction. Okay, that's the 2 main differences. This is literally the only thing you have to change between Shadow and Ice. You either go with a 2.5 second cast for Ice and Dimension Bullet for Ice, the second one for threat reduction and more damage, or you go Shadow with Delayed Blast. Now on NAU, I think this is the book that BSH drops, and it is very essential, very, very essential, because without this book, your shadows and your twin dragons, your ice dragons, do not get a second cast ever without the book. It is essential. It is one of the most essential books for a Warlock in order to even play. This last step says if you crit with your ice dragons, you get to cast a subsequent ice dragon that takes 0 seconds to cast, and it also takes no chi. Now for Shadow, once you cast it, and if it crits, it'll return 2 Shadow Orbs to you. It is one of the most essential things for a Shadow, and is one of the most essential things for an Ice. So for both specs, the 4 book is the most essential thing. Okay, doesn't matter which side, doesn't matter which one. It is the most essential book ever that you need. Without this book, it is very hard to play a Warlock and deal the same amount of damage as any other class. The RB is also essential for Warlocks. Because the RB, once you crit the second delayed blast, it will give you an extra Shadow Orb. So for NAEU, once Warlock is released, okay, most people are probably going to follow an ice spec first, because we have no access to the RB legendary skills yet, which is, I would say, half as essential as the four skill is. Without the RB, Shadow becomes kind of hard to keep up generating Shadow Orbs. without critting your RB or your delayed RBs. So most people are going to gravitate towards the I-Spec Dimension Bullet until the shadow right button skill, legendary skill comes out. Now those are the two main pieces of the Warlock's arsenal. Now I will go through almost every other skill that is, so that people who are wanting to try Warlock have an idea in mind what skills that they will need, what skills that they won't need for certain encounters. First important one I'll talk about is the block. The block legendary skill has not been released on any client, so don't even worry about any of the last skills here. Okay. The Warlock's one is a very situational spec. Okay. This first spec grants you a second key combo after or during block. It will grant the Warlock immunity during the time that the animation lasts. For example, if I hold up one block, you'll see that this F comes up. As soon as you use the F, you are immune during that whole time that the charm is being pushed out from the Warlock. And it is a pretty long cooldown. It's a 36-second cooldown immunity for 1 second. And this is actually very essential for a lot of future content to have these, because a Warlock only has 1, 2, 3 on-demand immunities. Your Z, your SS, and your 1F. Those are the 3 immunities. Only the 3 immunities that a Warlock has. It is essential that the Warlock times it correctly, and the reason why they have very few immunities is because they have an on-demand block. They have an on-demand block. They don't need to move out of the way or use up immunities like a summoner would have to use up immunities, long cooldown immunities like Dandelion, or an FM would have to use Ice Prison or Ice Flower or QEs to get out of dangerous situations, because they do not have an on-demand block. Warlocks have an on-demand block, so they're reduced in the number of immunities they have. Okay. Now, certain scenarios will call for the Warlock to use different versions of their block. This last one will launch a CC'd enemy, because this tree, this 3rd and 4th tree, this has the same deflect properties as an LBM's tab spin, a BM's deflect block, a KFM's deflect block. It has a deflect built in, and once you deflect anything, if you spec for this last one, you can launch stuff into the air if they are CC'd. I'd advise people to not use this spec during dungeons, because you don't really need this version. Almost every single Warlock for every circumstance will use this immunity, even in PvP, because this also hits a target 4 times and knocks them away. It pushes them back 10 meters. This is one of the most skills that you'll see during any Warlock PvP videos of being pushed away after a Warlock holds up a charm block. Yeah, I specifically mentioned aerials because I know people are gonna fucking use it. I'm telling them not to. Don't use this. Okay. The second most essential skill, apart from 4 and RB and V, is your 2 root. These are, all of these have a root property. Okay, all of these have a root property. This one pops a 5-meter field that'll root 5 times on a single tolerance target. But it is the longest cooldown. This one's a 24-second cooldown because it roots 5 times. And while it roots 5 times, it also goes through defense, and it also goes through deflection. Goes through defense and goes through deflection. So you're going to see this used on people that spin. You're going to see this used on people that hold block, standing there just holding block. KFMs, BMs, destroyers, LBMs. You're going to see this used on in PvP when people use up their mobility skills such as SS, QEs, because it hits 5 times. Once you get hit a second time, you're going to be rooted again. There is no cooldown on the root. Now these other versions, okay, these other versions all have a root, but they also have different properties that do not have, that the first one does not have. The first one has health regen on the amount of damage that it does. 50% of the damage done is returned to you as a HP. It also gives the 4-second soul vulnerability. It also grants 4 seconds of 40% speed reduction, movement reduction. This version will again knock up stunned or grokkied targets. It has some use if there are no other party members to launch when the scenario calls for an aerial. There's only 2 scenarios that call for an aerial currently, even in KR in endgame dungeons. And most of the time the Warlock does not have this duty, but it is here. It is available if necessary. This block is what I see some Warlocks use, not all, but some Warlocks use to inhibit defenses. This will break defense and prevent defensive abilities for 6 seconds. So you can't spin, you can't block, you can't use any of your defense abilities, Dandelion, etc. for 6 seconds after you use this. And this last one, it is more of a damage spec, and every time you use it, it just reduces your cooldown of your force skill. Reduces the cooldown of your dragons by, whatever it says. It'll say reduces the ice dragon's cooldown by 3 seconds. It'll reduce the shadow dragon by 1 second. Not very used at all. Not very used at all. Most Warlocks stick with the AoE route and just leave it at that. Your 3 is your next most used ability. Left side, PvE. Right side, PvP. Very, very simple. Okay. Some people still use the left side for PvP, but NC has balanced it so that the right side is given CC properties for PvP. The first hit on your 3 will groggy and knock away for 2 seconds and 4 seconds respectively when you use this in PvP. Or you can use the PvE version. PvE version will grant you, if you hit all 5 hits, it will grant you instant cast on your ice dragons. It has dual properties. It affects both ice dragons and shadow dragons. If you hit all 5 hits, like say this, hits 5 times, all 5 hits, your dragon is instant. No cost, nothing. It's instant. It has the same properties as a regular cast, where if you crit it, you can get a second free cast crit. So people can start putting combos together. You know, you get your 5 hits on 3, then you cast a 4, hope it crits, then you get another 4, and you start reducing the cooldown on 4 again, using V and F, and you do it over and over again. Use Soul Steel, get your 3 reset, get your 4 reset, do it all over again. Now for Shadow version, every tick on the 3 will give you 3 Shadow Orbs. So essentially, you get your Shadow Dragons, you cast it, you get your Delayed Blast ready, you push 3, and you'll instantly have 3 orbs again to cast 4 for your Shadow Dragons. It doesn't matter if it's post-nerf or not, Child Pay. Every client is getting the same skill patch. Every client is getting the same skill patch. NAEU are going to get post-nerf Warlock. You're not going to get pre-nerf. Okay. So that's skills 1, 2, 3, 4, V and RB. Now the other 3 skills on the hotbar, Z, X, C, those are pretty much a Warlock's defensive abilities. 1, Z, and C are very much a Warlock's defensive abilities. But I'll go through X first. X is a Warlock's main CC. They have 3 specs that you can go through. First tree, it will cause a 3-second down.